Hot dog. Here we go. Now, here we go. This is, it's all good. Come in. Come on. While y'all taking y'all dabbing, I can have my daily supplements. What is going on with this thing? Man, this has been nuts today. What is going on here? Okay, I see. Oh, I see what's going on. Wow. My bad. Hold on 1 second. Okay, this thing is going to drive me nuts. Mm. Part 2. I'm about to put an image on it. Once I put an image on it, we're going to jump right over into that. Let me take the rest of my supplements. Thank y'all. These are not drugs. These are just my elderberry and some other stuff. You'll be all right. Let me put a Kamava up here. Peace. I'm back. What the hell is that? Setting back up. Yeah, but no, actually. Trash it. Hit it again. B1 MFM for you. How is everybody? How is everybody? Good morning. I'm back. 9 people. How y'all doing? I just want to take my I went upstairs, took a little bit more time than I planned. I just dropped it. I got like 5 minutes to make this thing pop. Okay. Jump on. I went on these two. Okay, I'm almost done, y'all. And I should be on the stream in 1 second. I'm actually not working that hard. I'm gonna start working hard. I'm trying. The work will be to get with this artist for the graphics and other things. Anyway, here we go. Okay, I'm about to drop this. Yeah, I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. I just want to do this real fast. Take my supplements. I'm gonna take my DHEA and my NAC and my elderberry and something else. Just your vitamins. I came in and didn't do my vitamins. Oh wow, this just jumped up. My elderberry. Let's do it. Hit it. Who you gonna call? Coon Busters. This is part 2. This is, of course, today, Monday, January 4th, 2021. This is part 2 of the Angry Black Men's Book Club, and you know, the weather's crazy. If you have questions, and I'm reading, I may not see your questions, you've got my email. I'm going to put this out. You can direct questions to me. I'm going to work on having this whole issue of moderation, everything done. Maybe when I come back in February. Right now, I just got to get a feel for this. All right. MFM to everybody. MFM. I want to do a little bit of junk because it's been really, really heavy. This stuff is heavy. And I thought it would make sense to give you some filth and some humor, but it will all be relevant. And I don't want to do, I want something to be funny. I need y'all laughing a little bit, so, because some of the stuff is like so sad. And I was trying to think of where to start off. And I'm going to go in on feminism because I just want to do this. I want y'all to understand that, in particular, a lot of black men are being messed over by feminism. So I'm going to do, so we're going to be doing eugenics, feminism, race, sex, and I'm thinking I should start off with this first book. I've always loved this book, and I have a hardback copy. It's called Who Stole Feminism? Who Stole Feminism? And I'm going to put the title up, put it up on the board. And by the way, the folks who watch me on YouTube, it's amazing. If you don't tell people that they can donate, they won't do it. So let me just say, for you folks on Facebook and straight on YouTube that don't notice that you absolutely can donate, there's a book I want to get by Houston Chamberlain. Houston Chamberlain's a bisexual English Satanist who's the author, basically was Hitler's John the Baptist. And you can't, the closest thing I could find that was really good was $900. No, I don't want $900. But I did find a book of his hardback that I could get for $30. And there was a book, I think I ordered it, well, I'm close to ordering it, on this Indian woman that took Nazism to Asia. And so a lot of what's happened to black people from these Indians and other people coming here is influenced by Nazism because there's a relationship. So I'd like to have that, and you'll keep seeing how this Nazi, Luciferian, neo-pagan, eugenics, baby killing, LGBTQ, anti-Christian, anti-black stuff is all interconnected, and black people are the targets of all these people hating our guts. If you don't think that we're not unique in some way, why is everybody on us so hard? I mean, they're not on the Chinese, they're not on the Japanese, there are all kinds of people in the world that hate. Why us? I'm going somewhere. So I sort of think some of this Hebrew stuff these people are talking has to be true, because no other group of people gets messed with. I mean, ever people hate you all over the world you've never seen before. How do you get to hate me? Okay, anyway. So I want to expose some things. And I am looking for people to partner. We got to do some mental health. I also want to talk about STDs. It's a new year, and a lot of folks, you don't need dirty dicks, dirty vaginas, dirty behinds, dirty throats. So I really do want people to hi everybody, love everybody. In fact, I was thinking 10, 15, I got 2 minutes. If y'all have a question to ask me, you can call. You can actually reach out to me via Gmail. Okay, and so if I don't have an answer, I might not be able. So I'll try to respond. Sometimes emails go to spam or whatever. Let me know. Let me see. Oh, now let me put this book up here, and we're going to start in 1 second. The book is called Who Stole Feminism by Christine Hoff Summers. And I'm going to start. I'm not going to do the whole book. I'm trying to do like a literature review. And she's a feminist, but she talks about how corrupt. Who stole feminism? You know, I have folk come and ask me, what book did you talk about? Please, when you ask, please don't write me stupid questions. You got this video. You can rewind it. You can go in and go through it. Why call and ask me all the different things? You know, I had someone say, well, what was it that you said? Damn it, why did I take the time to record it? So please, don't be stupid. I get offended by that. I didn't get to, in school, a lot of you millennials, some of y'all, I mean, I don't get it. We had to remember what the people said, write it down, and get it. There wasn't that video to go back and check. I mean, man, that would have been cool. So the website exists, or should I say the YouTube channel. That means the video sits there. Once it's recorded, it's downloaded. You can go back, cursor through it, and get it, versus asking me. I don't remember everything I say, and I shouldn't have to. All right, it's 10:15. This is chapter 9 from Who Stole Feminism, and this is called Noble Lies. Statistics and studies on such provocative subjects as eating orders, rape, battery, and wage differentials are used to underscore the plight of women in the oppressive gender system and to help recruit adherents to the gender feminist cause. But if the figures are not true, they almost never serve the interests of the victimized women they concern. Anorexia is a disease. Blaming men does nothing to help curb it. Battery and rape are crimes that shatter lives. Those who suffer the most must be cared for, and those who cause the suffering must be kept from doing further harm. But in all we do to help, the most loyal ally is truth. The truth brought to public light recruits the best of us to work for change. On the other hand, even the best intentioned noble lie discredits the finest cause. What she's saying is a lot of these feminists are goddamn liars. And they don't help women lying and castigating all men. And it hurts women. But this is what the feminists do. And the liar-ass pork-chop feminist running dogs who are in our neighborhood repeat the lies of racist white supremacist women to create even more confusion in our communities. Even the other people know that this stuff is a lie. Who doesn't get it? A lot of our dumbass black women. I'm going to keep saying it. The backbone of a lot of this bullshit in our community right now are dumbass black women that get their information from the same white woman that attacked the boy over the cell phone in the New York hotel. It's a kind of intersectional broad that these sisters talk to. So what she going to tell a black woman that's going to be useful if she has to interact with a young black male or an adult black male, other than hatred? All the black women that have been tortured and abused through the abortion has been brought to them by their intersectional white lesbian feminist allies. Who suffered the brunt of the bullshit? Black men and children. Let me keep reading. Gender feminist ideology holds that physical menace towards women is the norm. The cause of battered women has been a handy bandwagon for this creed. Gloria Steinem's portrait of the male-female intimacy under patriarchy is typical. Listen to what these broads say. Patriarchy requires violence or the substantial threat of violence in order to maintain itself. The most dangerous situation for a woman is not the unknown man in the street or even the enemy in wartime, but a husband or lover in the isolation of their own home. Steinem's description of the dangers women face in their own home is reminiscent of the Super Bowl hoax of January 1993. Some day before that Super Bowl, American women were alerted that a sharp increase in the battery was to be expected on the day of the game. The implications were sensational, but there There were reliable studies, and the current climate of the story had a long ring of plausibility, and it quickly spread. Here's the chronology. Thursday, January 28th, a news conference was called in Pasadena, California, at the site of the forthcoming Super Bowl game by a coalition of women's groups. At the news conference, reporters were informed that a significant anecdotal evidence suggested that Super Bowl Sunday is the biggest day of the year for violence against women. Prior to the conference, there had been reports of increases as high as 40% in the calls for help from victims that day. At the conference, Sheila Kuehl of the California Women's Law Center cited a study done at Virginia's Old Dominion University 3 years before, saying that it had found that police reports of beatings and hospital admissions in Northern Virginia rose 40% after the games won by the Redskins' 1988-1989 season. The presence of Linda Mitchell at the conference, a representative of the media watchdog group Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, lent credibility to the cause. All about this time, a very large media mailing was sent by Dubisky Associates, warning at-risk women, don't remain at home with him during the game. The idea that sports fans are prone to attack wives or girlfriends on that climatic day persuaded many men as well. Robert Lipsyte of the New York Times would soon after refer to the Abuse Bowl. Leonore Walker, this is Friday, January 29th. Leonore Walker, a Denver psychologist and author of The Battered Woman, appeared on Good Morning America, claiming to have compiled a 10-year record showing a sharp increase in violent incidents against women on Super Bowl Sundays. Here again, a representative from FAIR, Laura Flanders, was present to lend credibility to the cause. Saturday, January 30th, a story in the Boston Globe written by Linda Goroff reported that women's shelters and hotlines have flooded with more calls from victims on Super Bowl Sunday than on any other day of the year. Goroff cited one study of women's shelters out west showed a 40% increase in the climb in calls. A pattern advocates said is repeated nationwide, including in Massachusetts. Ms. Goroff asked specialists in domestic violence to explain the phenomenon. Many felt everything about the Super Bowl was calculated to give men the idea that women are there for their use and abuse. More than one advocate mentioned provocatively dressed cheerleaders at the game may reinforce abusers' perceptions that women are intended to serve men, she wrote. According to Nancy Isaac, an expert on domestic violence at the Harvard School of Public Health, men see violence as their right. I'm supposed to be king in my castle. It's supposed to be my day. If you don't have dinner ready on time, you're going to get it. Other newspapers joined in. Robert Lipsyte described the connection between the tension generated by the big game and the violence it causes. Someone shut up that kid or someone's going to get pounded. Michael Collier of the Oakland Tribune wrote that Super Bowl causes boyfriends, husbands, and fathers to explode like mad linemen, leaving girlfriends, wives, and children beaten. Journalists and television commentators all over the country sounded the alarm. CBS and the Associated Press called Super Bowl Sunday a day of dread. And just before the game, NBC broadcast a public service spot reminded men that domestic violence is a crime. In this rolling sea of media credulity was a lone island of professional integrity. Ken Ringel of the Washington Post staff writer took the time to call around to check on the sources of the story. When Ringel asked Jeanette Katz, she's Jewish by the way, professor of sociology and criminal justice at Old Dominion, and one of the principal authors of the study cited by Mrs. Kell on Thursday press conference about the connection between violence and football games. She said, "That's not what we found at all. Instead," she told Ringel, "they had found an increase in emergency room admissions that was not associated with the occurrence of football games in general." Ringel then called Charles Patrick Ewan, the professor of the University of Buffalo, whom Dobrinsky Associates had quoted saying Super Bowl Sunday is the one day in the year when hotlines, shelters, and other agencies that work with battered women get most of the reports and complaints of domestic violence. Quote, "I never said that," unquote, Ewing told Ringel. When told about Ewan's denial, Frank Dobrinsky corrected himself, saying that the quote should have read one of the days of the year. But that explanation either makes the claim incoherent, since only one day could have the most battery complaints, or trivializes it, since any day, including April Fool's Day, could now be said to be a day of heightened brutality. Ringel checked with Linda Garoff, the Boston Globe reporter. Garoff told him she had never seen the study she cited, but had been told of it by Fair. Miss Mitchell of Fair told Ringel that the authority for the 40% figure was Leonore Walker. Walker's office in turn referred the calls to the subject to Michael Lindsay, a Denver psychologist and authority on battered women. Pressed by Ringel, Lindsay admitted he could find no basis for the report. Quote, "I haven't been any more successful than you in tracking down any of this," close quote, he said. Quote, "You might think we have one of these myth things here," close quote. Later, other reporters got to Miss Walker, pressing her to detail her findings. "We don't use them for public consumption," she explained. "We use them to guide us in advocacy projects. It would have been more honest for the feminists who initiated the campaign to admit that there was no scientific basis for saying that football fans are more brutal to women than are chess players or Democrats. Nor was there any more hard data for the claim that there was a significant rise in domestic violence on Super Bowl Sunday." Ringel's unraveling of the myth thing was published on the front page of the Washington Post on January 31st. On February 2nd, the Boston Globe staff writer Bob Holler published what amounted to a retraction of Mrs. Garoff's story. Holler had done some more digging and had gotten Fair's Stephen Rendell to back off of the organization's earlier support of the claim. "It should have not gone out on Fair material," said Rendell. Holler got another set of interviews, this time with psychologists who told him that they had their doubts about the story from the very beginning. One expert, Joan Stiles, public education coordinator for the Massachusetts Coalition of Battered Women's Service Groups, told the Globe that the Super Bowl story sensationalized and trivialized the battering problem and damaged the cause's credibility. Lundy Bancroft, a training director for the Cambridge-based counseling program for men who battered, said, "I disbelieved the 40% thing from the moment I heard it." Bancroft also suggested the campaign to pressure NBC to air the domestic violence spot unfairly stigmatized football fans. "There is no stereotypical batterer," he said. As Michael Lindsay commented to Ken Ringel, "When people make crazy statements like this, the credibility of the whole cause can go right out the window." According to Ringel, Linda Mitchell from Fair would later acknowledge that she was aware during the original news conference that Kell was misrepresenting the Old Dominion study. Ringel asks whether she did not feel obligated to challenge her colleague. Quote, "I wouldn't do that in front of the media," close quote, Mitchell said. Quote, "She has a right to report it as she wants," close quote. Parentheses, Fair would later take issue with Ringel's interpretation of Mitchell's remark. Holler's investigation fully supported the conclusion Ringel had reached. Ringel wrote, "Despite their dramatic claims, none of the activists appears to have any evidence that actually that a link actually exists between football and wife beating. Yet the concept has gained such credence that the campaign has rolled on anyway, unabated. Of the shelters and hotlines monitored on Sunday at the 27th football Super Bowl, some reported variations in the number of calls for help that day, and others did not. In Buffalo, whose team and fans had suffered a crashing defeat, there were no unusual increases. Not surprisingly, Ringel's story generated a flurry of media activity. Fair sent a letter to the Washington Post attacking the piece, claiming it contained errors and quotes taken out of context. A subsequent column in the Washington Post mentioned that Fair was happy with Ringel's reporting, but the paper otherwise supported the gist of his piece, and then there was more. The American Journalism Review did its own investigation of Ringel's reporting. Its conclusion was both that Ringel was correct in the reporting that there was no solid data to support the 40% figure, but that Ringel had twisted the use of quotes selectively to support his thesis. Ringel's response: he stands by his story. Despite Ringel's expose and the ensuing media attention, the Super Bowl statistic will be with us for a while, doing its divisive work. In the book on how to make the world a better place for women in 5 minutes a day, a comment under the heading "Did You Know?" informs readers that Super Bowl Sunday is the most violent day of the year, with the highest reported number of domestic battering cases. How a belief in that Miss Andrews Kennard could make the world a better place for women is not explained. A Miss Andrews is female misogyny against men, male hatred, male hating lies represented as truth. Like Bill Cosby raped that Jewish athlete female. It's garbage. How many women in the United States are brutalized by men in their lives? Here's a cross-section of various answers. During a 9-year period, intimates committed 5.6 million victimizations against women, on average of 626,000. Approximately 1.8 million women a year are physically assaulted by their husbands or boyfriends. In the past, okay, these are the numbers that they get, various answers. Okay, 5.6 million victimizations against women, okay, like 626,000 a year from the U.S. Department of Justice. 1.8 million is from behind closed doors violence in the American family. In the past year, 3 million women have been battered. This is Joe Biden claims this, that, and he had his wife killed. I believe that. Absolutely, I believe it in my heart. He had his first wife killed to cover up what he did to the daughter that died too. That's what I believe. Total domestic violence reported and unreported affects as many as 4 million women a year. This is another report by Joe Biden. An estimated 3 to 4 million women are brutally beaten each year in the U.S. This is from the Feminist Dictionary. Nearly 6 million wives will be abused by their husband in any 1 year. Time magazine. More than 50% of all women will experience some form of violence from their spouses during their marriage. More than 1/3 are battered reportedly every year. National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Estimates in the number of women beaten per second vary. A woman is beaten every 18 seconds. This is by Gail Dines. An American woman is beaten by her husband or boyfriend every 15 seconds. New York Times. Every 12 seconds, a woman in the United States is beaten by her husband or lover. That's from Maribella. A gong will be sounded every 10 seconds for a woman being beaten in the United States. It's a clandestine project, Johns Hopkins University. In the United States, every 7.4 seconds, a woman is beaten by her husband. 6.5 million women are assaulted by their partners, 1 every 5 seconds. That's from Brother Peace. Sometimes the same source will give the figure both in millions of women and in seconds without acknowledging that the two are inconsistent. Since there are 31,536,000 seconds in a year, and a 15-second rate would amount to 2.1 million assaults. 3 to 4 million would mean one every 7.9 or 10.5 seconds. This mistake is common. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 3 to 4 million women are battered every year in the United States. One every 15 seconds. Mary McGrory, Washington Post. Domestic violence affects an estimated 4 to 5 million women every year. Every 15 seconds, an American woman is abused by her partner. Christian Science Monitor. There are 3 million to 4 million women beaten by husbands or lovers every year. That's one every 15 seconds. Chicago Tribune. Richard J. Gillis and Mary A. Strauss are academic social scientists from the University of Rhode Island and the University of New Hampshire, respectively, who have been studying domestic violence for more than 25 years. Their research is among the most respected and frequently cited by social scientists, by police, by the FBI, and by personnel in domestic violence agencies. For a long time, Gillis and Strauss were highly regarded by feminist activists for the pioneer work they had done in this once neglected area. But they fell out of favor in the late 70s because their findings were not informed by the battery is caused by patriarchy thesis. The fact that they were men was also held against them. Let me stop for 1 second. When you hear this believe the woman bullshit, basically whatever women say is true. That's a lie. Some women are honest, some women are liars. Some men are honest, some men are liars. I don't believe in one sex being superior to the other, and I definitely don't believe in one sex being more honest than the other. It depends on the person, not on their genitalia. Okay, that's garbage. And by the way, listen to that. So if you go with what these feminists say, just all women get beat all the time. I I have one associate in the last 30 years that I've been around that I knew hit their girlfriend. That's the only one I know of. I'm not saying women don't get hit. That's male. But I know plenty of lesbian women that have beat the hell out of other lesbian women. I do know about that. It's interesting that domestic violence is only framed in men beating women, not on women beating women, and not on women assaulting men. Um, just for rule of thumb, it's 2 to 1 by a lot of people that for every 2 women that get hit or beat, there's a man getting beaten. It's interesting that men can't be the victims of domestic violence. In fact, child abuse is typically seen as men beating children when everybody knows that women are around children more than men are, in particular in the black community. So child abuse and a lot of this violence issue that you're hearing, it's female driven. And it's you women doing it as much as it's men are doing it. So there are men that beat and drink. This is true. And they may do twice as much as women. But what most people don't know, that a significant amount of domestic violence that happens is woman on woman, women beating the crap out of women. It's up to 20 to 25% of violence against women is lesbian. That's never mentioned because it might make men human. That some men love women. Some men couldn't think of hitting a woman. They could beat a man to death but never touch a woman. The idea that men might love or care or feel something for women, the radical lesbian feminists that put this stuff out here need the idea that men hate women to justify their insane crusade. And the biggest chumps and suckers who buy into this are black women. Y'all are the biggest chumps in this. And until black men start calling them out, that's why when someone talks, I'm just completely disrespectful about it. And then one day we'll sit down at the table and we'll acknowledge that some men are abusive, but there are also women that are abusive. Some guys are good guys. I know men who've been punched out by a woman and walked away. Guys been beat up on and didn't fight back. Okay, and don't call the police. And when they're threatened, they don't do anything. So you're more likely to get stats because women will call. They'll even lie on someone and get them in trouble. Men can't do that. If a man has, he's expected to handle his business. And it's interesting, in this age of equality, women still get that help that they don't have to handle their business because they're women. They still need to be protected. So you can have a woman who's a martial artist, who's a lawyer, and if she calls the cops, even if her husband's a simp and a couch potato, she gets protected. I'm not against that, but I resent the fact that the women have advanced in terms of rights, privileges, and immunities, but their responsibility and accountability has either diminished or remained the same. To whom much is given, much is required. And feminism, to whom much is given, nothing's required. That goes against my belief as a Christian, okay? I don't like it. So here you got these two men who dedicated their political career, their academic career, to bring up and protect women. And these lesbo dykes come after them because they don't say everything that they say they should do. They don't lie on men. They don't say that there's something wrong. I mean, this is absolutely insane. And I'm sorry, where is our Phyllis Schlafly? Where are the black women setting the record straight on this garbage? This is a white feminist exposing the truth. Other than Julia Hare, black women who get more educated than black men, y'all have been total slacker jackasses on the facts. Y'all have not done your work. You have not dignified black men or black children, for that matter, black women. And you suck in terms of being advocates for black women that are poor and working class and grassroots. It's all about the elitist, Greek letter, hat wearing bullshit stuff. It's really shallow. And it's despicable because y'all get the education, you get the breaks over black men, and you don't deliver. You don't. I'm serious. I came up. The principals are female, the teachers are female, most people. Okay, fine. If the matriarchy is what we black people have right now, you ladies have fucked up. Totally. There's no excuses. Okay, and don't come back and tell me about the men. You want matriarchy. If what we've got right now is matriarchy, and that means y'all in control and black men ain't this, no, then y'all have completely failed. You don't need no man, and your kids out in the street getting shot and all this kind of stuff, then it's your fault. Not the dude that impregnated you because you didn't need him other than to pass off the sperm, like some animal out in the wild kingdom. Let me go back to reading. Oh, yes, be angry feminist. We're going to talk about you whores. We're going to push an angry black men need to rebel against these dogs. And it's not all women. It's not all black women. But just, we need to intellectually, I'm not trying to put my hands on it, intellectually go to war with these tramps, these skanks, and put them in their place. And since they're so unsuited for domestic life, I don't even want them barefoot and pregnant around me. That felt good. Now let's keep reading. Gillis and Strauss did find high levels of violence in many American families, but both in their national surveys, they found that women were just as likely to engage in violence as men. Equal opportunity beaters and violent. I have more friends who've been assaulted by their women than have hit the women. I'm just saying. Are y'all understanding me? Equal. And by the way, one of my best buddies in Canada, former Canadian Senator Ann Cools, found that women initiated half of the violence. In fact, women were more likely than men to swing or strike first. She also found that women were more likely to kill children, to be physically abusive to children than men. Infanticide, killing children, is a woman thing. Killing children, beating children, burning children, torturing children is primarily women are dominant. See, that's domestic violence, isn't it? Notice how the violence is only when it's a woman in relationship to a man, not a woman fighting another woman, not a woman beating up a child. This is how this is structured to not hold women accountable for the fucked up things that they do. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God for me. Are men violent? Do men kill children? Are men pedophiles? You damn Skippy. There's some rotten ass men out here. They all should be strung up. And I feel the same way about women that do the same kinds of things. And having a vagina, whether it's tight or not, if you bad, you bad. Women are just as violent as men are. And some of you brothers, like me, I dated a woman, I had to stop. This woman, they would put their hands up. What are you putting your hands on me for? What are they kicking me for? Kick me? Never kick her. I disappeared and stopped talking to her ass. What would a woman strike me for? What do you have to snatch something from me for? Why? I didn't snatch nothing from no woman, no female friend of mine. If there was something they had that I wanted, they'd like me enough to give it to me. Snatch it? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Slam a door, do something, do some aggressive stuff. Come on. You know why the lady kicked me? For answering my phone. You know why she snatched my phone? I answered it after being around them for 8 hours. What? You said, what'd you snatch someone's phone for? What possessed them to think that? But when you put your hands on someone, hold on, let me stop. Ladies. The way that men operate is that if I put my hands on another man and we're not buddies or friends and it's an act of aggression, I presume that they will strike back at me. Ladies, if you put your hand on a man who's conditioned when people strike them, they strike back, why is it domestic violence if he pops you back when you pop first? That's why guys get along. You don't put your hands on someone unless you're going to have a fight with them or have some situation. So, unless I'm prepared to be in an aggressive situation with another male, keep my hands to myself. What would possess someone to think that they could strike a grown-ass man, not knowing his temperament or how he might take that he may not flip and pop your ass back? How is that hatred of women versus you shouldn't touch anybody that you aren't prepared for them to touch back? No, I'm not saying men should strike women. I've never ever said that. I'm always going to be against putting your hands. Don't put your hands on no woman. I don't like it. But I've had women put their hands on me. And they're lucky that I don't believe in that. But you should not put your hands on someone. Ladies, it's a lie that a man shouldn't bust your ass back if you put your hands on him. You should respect other people. If you put your hands on someone, they're within their right to defend themselves. Feminism says men are violent and they hate women and they're cruel and they watch football and beat up on women. But yet if a woman comes to soccer punches a man, he's supposed to not hit back because he's a male. Wait a minute. If he's violent and out of control, shouldn't it be expected if you put your hands on him that he would knock you the fuck out? See how their lives, their lie doesn't even make sense. If men are just naturally violent and brutal towards women, why would they in any way encourage women to be aggressive with men? If they wanted to protect women from violence. And why haven't more women confronted them? Black women, I'm telling you, y'all been sorry as hell for 50 years to let these white women bring this garbage in our schools. Y'all too busy trying to hang with them and get blonde extensions and blonde weaves. We need black women to woman up and become assertive in terms of their role as leaders in the community and their respective sphere as women. It's lacking. Y'all are failing. An F grade, all the degrees and open, all that doesn't mean a damn thing to me. Okay, listen to this. I'll go back and read that. Gellis and Strauss do find high levels of violence in many American families, but both in their national surveys they found that women were just as likely as men to engage in violence. They found that siblings are the most violent of all. Surprise, surprise. They distinguished between minor violence such as throwing objects, pushing, shoving, and slapping, no injuries, no serious intimidation, and severe violence such as kicking, hitting, or trying to hit with an object, hitting with fists, beating up, and threatening with a gun or a knife. Actions that have high probability of leading to injury are accompanied by serious threat of injury. The vast majority of family disputes involve minor violence rather than severe violence. And their 1985 Second National Family Violence Survey, sponsored by the National Institute of Mental Health, they found that 16% of couples were violent. The Saturday Night Brawlers, with the wife just as likely as the husband to slap, grab, shove, or throw things. And 3 to 4% of the couples, there was at least one act of severe violence by the husband against the wife. But in their surveys, they found that women assault their partners at about the same rate as men assault their partners. This applies to both minor and severe assaults. Gellis and Strauss are careful to say that women are far more likely to be injured and need medical care, but overall, the percentage of women who are injured seriously enough to need medical care is still relatively small compared to the inflated claims of the gender feminists and the politicians, fewer than 1%. Mary Strauss estimates that the approximately 100,000 women a year are victims of the severe kinds of violence shown in the TV film Burning Bed. That is a shockingly high number of victims, but it falls far short of Biden's claim derived from feminist advocacy studies that more than 3 or 4 million women are victims of horrifying violence. Strauss and Gellis have made other discoveries not appreciated by the gender feminist. Among them are the findings that because of the changing demographics and improved public awareness, there was a significant decrease in wife battery between 75 and 85. My God, men got better. What's the reward? More bitching, more male hatred, more lies, more propaganda how rotten men are. Like men can't learn to wash dishes, like men can't take care of kids, like men can't improve. See, the feminists, they stepped up their game when the men started adjusting and saying, I need to wear more deodorant and learn how to be more kind to prevent men from becoming more successful in having relationships with women. They ramped up their propaganda of anti-male hatred to prevent men and women from coming together because they're dykes pushing this. And a lot of them are black dykes. Again, men became less violent and the propaganda against men increased. Damn, can't win for losing, can we, brothers? Can't ever be right, can't work hard, can't make enough money, can't fuck enough, inches ain't big enough. There's just That is a whole feminist thing of always downing everything male, and at the same time pushing gender where they get rid of womanhood as well. How come women are too dumb to see this shit? And why are men such simps that need pussy so bad? Until they don't say anything when all these lies are going on. Let me keep going. And yes, I'm saying all kinds of irreverent stuff. I wouldn't want to work in a fucking university if I have to lie about this stuff and listen to the women's studies. And I just heard about all the women being raped, like most women get raped all the time. I was thinking, God, I'm not saying that men don't rip up women. They do. But like almost all the women have been raped all the time. That shit doesn't okay, right? So decrease in wife battery between 75 85. Moreover, they once reported that battery increased during pregnancy. They now say they were mistaken. Data from the 1985 Second National Family Violence Survey indicate that the previously reported association between pregnancy and husband-to-wife violence is spurious and an artifact effect of another variable, age. Gellis and Strauss considered domestic violence to be a serious national problem. They have for years been advocates for social, medical, and legal intervention to help battered women. Notice there's nothing in there for battered men. Men, the men that are researching this, a man that gets beaten and abused, he's on his own. Fuck him. Right? There is no help for men that are the victims of violence. So what? Which basically means that if this guy wants the violence to stop, he better punch that bitch back because there's no shelter in the courts, right? But when he hits the woman back, that's domestic violence. See how this thing is that the man can't win for losing? See how this support and infrastructure, right? For men can't be the victims of violence from women, although men do get killed and murdered. But in fact, black women are more likely to kill black men than white women are to kill white men. And so, yeah, so the man should either get out because if he pops the woman back in self-defense, especially if it's a black man who goes to court, his ass is going to jail. This is actually rigged against men for all these rights and power that women say that they don't have. Y'all women have a lot more than what you say. And in particular, black women, you have a hell of a lot more than white women do. That's even more reason for you to reject this bullshit that these feminists give you. It is a choice to be an idiot, to eat the slop, the intellectual garbage and slop that these white lesbian feminists tell you in your intersectionality meetings. Let me keep reading. Gellis and Strauss considered domestic violence to be a serious national problem. They have for years been advocates for social, medical, and legal intervention to help battered women. All at the same time, according to their studies, more than 84% of the families are not violent. And among the 16% who are, nearly half of the violence, though not half of the injuries, is perpetrated by women. Meaning that 84% of the men don't hit on women. And in the 16% of men that are in the category that might be violent, women start half the shit. So you need to take 8 off of the 16. 84 plus 8, 92% of men are not violent against women. And 92% of women aren't violent against men. Meaning that out of every 10 men and women, there's an asshole. It's basically equal. Journalists, activists, and even gender feminists make extensive use of Gellis and Strauss research Some researchers manipulate their data to get shocking figures on abuse. If you overlook the researchers' distinction between minor and severe violence, if you never mention that women do just as much of the shoving, grabbing, pushing, and slapping, you arrive at very high figures for battery: 3 million, 4 million, 6 million, depending on how slack you are and what you count as battery. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence gives shocking figures on the abuse in their fundraising brochure. More than 50% of all women will experience some form of violence from their spouses during marriage. More than 1/3 are battered repeatedly every year. We get the impression that 1/3 of all married women, 18 million, are repeatedly being battered. Where did the coalition get these figures? Either they relied on their own special gender feminist sources, or they creatively interpreted the FBI's, Department of Justice, or Gellis and Strauss's studies to suit their purposes. The latter is what the Commonwealth Fund, a New York State philanthropy concerned with public health, did with their Women's Health Survey. In July 1993, the Commonwealth Fund released the results of a telephone survey of 2,500 women designed to carry out by Lewis, Harris, and Associates. The Commonwealth and Harris investigators took the question directly from Gellis and Strauss's survey and got the following results. I would like you to tell me whether in the past 12 months your partner ever insulted or swore at you. Yes, 34%. No, 66%. Stomped out of the room or house or yard. Yes, 34%. No, 60%. Threatened to hit you or throw something at you. Yes, 5%. No, 95%. Threw or smashed or hit or kicked something. Yes, 11%. No, 89%. Threw something at you. Yes, 3%. 97%. No. Pushed, grabbed, or slapped you. Yes, 5%. No, 95%. Kicked, bit, or hit you with fist or some other object. Yes, 2%. No, 98%. Beat you up. 0. Did not beat up. 100%. Choked you. No. Threatened you with a gun or a knife. 0. Used a knife or gun. 0. For the serious things, look at that again. Beat you up. No yeses. Choked you? No yeses. Threatened you with a knife or gun? No yeses. Used a knife or gun? No yeses. And 0. And by the way, this is oriented only towards males. They didn't ask the men if they had a problem. Using these findings and based on the assumption that there are approximately 55 million married women living with someone as a couple, the Harris Commonwealth Survey concluded as many as 4 million women a year were victims of physical assaults, and 20.7 million women were verbally or emotionally abused by their partners. Newspapers around the country, including the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Detroit News, the San Francisco Chronicle, carried the bleak tidings that 37% of married women are emotionally abused and 3.9 million are physically assaulted every year. No one mentioned, and all the surveys questioned were taken from the questionnaire that Gellis and Strauss had used in their 1975 and 1985 Strauss to interpret the data. The survey actually showed that domestic violence was still decreasing. It's decreasing, and these whores ramp it up and make it seem as if men have just gone crazy on women. Damn. And you know who the image of the violent, abusive people are? Black men. Black men just keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And our stupid ass black women keep saying they ain't shit, they ain't shit, they ain't shit, they ain't shit. Okay. The survey found that 2 to 3% of the respondents had suffered what Gellis and Strauss classify as severe violence. So, of all this domestic violence, 2 to 3%, so 2 or 3 out of every 100 have a lot. Now, you know what's interesting about the 2-3% number for domestic violence? Do you know that's close to the number of people who are LGBTQ in America? Just saying. So a big part of this stuff, I'm not saying there ain't men beating up on women, it's true. But a whole bunch of this stuff is still queer. But who gets the weight and the blame for violence? It becomes men. Heterosexual men get the full blame because it's about attacking the existence of the family with men at the head of it. Gay couples, gay families break up at 3 to 4 times that of heterosexuals. There's more violence. You'll not see information represented on that. So when a gay man beats up another man or a gay woman beats up another woman, that violence is attributed to heterosexual men as proof of how bad we are. So people we don't even screw, we're not even with, we're blamed for their violent tendencies. Let me keep reading. So look at this. Let me go back. But the most interesting finding of all, and one entirely overlooked by the press, for it did not harmonize with the notes of alarm in the Harris Commonwealth press release, was a response poll received to questions 8 through 11, where the most severe forms of violence. Gellis and Strauss had estimated that these things happen to fewer than 1% of women. Fewer than 1% of women have very violent men. So all this hatred of women, all this misogyny and abuse, it's not as commonplace as the hype. This is all a campaign of hatred against men, and many of you women participate in it. You just hear some shit and you repeat it. Now, if women all had black eyes like peas, you'd have at least some anecdotal evidence. But instead, just quick to be down on men. Quick. We have a society that promotes male hatred. And by the way, if you keep putting hate out in the atmosphere, you'll get some hate back. Some of this, ladies, if you're putting hate out there because you've been fed all this hate, eventually you're going to get some hate back. What you put out there is what you receive. If feminism puts all this hate out there towards men, some men are going to hate back. It's time for, a lot of what happens has a lot to do with how you respond to people. If you're nasty all the time, since all men are rapists and beaters and we all hate children and we just going to beat you up and rape you, and then so you're nasty to everybody, someone who's nasty is going to be nasty to you. Now, let me keep going. According to the survey sample, the percentage of women who had these experiences was virtually zero. All respondents answered no to all the questions on severe violence. This finding does not, of course, mean that no one was brutally attacked, but it does suggest that severe violence is relatively rare. So where did the 4 million figure from physical assault come from, and the 20 million for psychological abuse? Clearly, the interpreters of the Harris Commonwealth poll data were operating with a much wider conception of abuse than Gellis and Strauss. Looking at the survey instrument, we find that they indeed opened the door wide to the alarmist conclusions they disseminated. For some of the answers that Gellis and Strauss counted as minor and not for indicative of abuse, the Harris Commonwealth people took seriously. For example, the questionnaire asked whether in the past 12 months your partner, one, insulted you or swore at you, two, stomped out of the room or the house or yard. 34% of the women answered yes to these. The questions in all were classified as victims of emotional and verbal abuse. Had men been included, one wonders whether they would not have been proved equally abused. Like I said, these only deal with women. What happens to men isn't of importance. To arrive at a figure of 4 million for physical abuse, the survey used the simple expedient of ignoring the distinction between minor and severe violent acts, counting all acts of violence as acts of abuse. 5% of the women they spoke to said they had been pushed, grabbed, shoved, or slapped. They were all classified as victims of domestic violence and added to get in a projection of 4 million victims nationwide. No effort was made to find out if the aggression was mutual or whether it was physically harmful or seriously intimidating. If a couple has a fight and she stomps out of the room or yard and he grabs her arm, this would count as domestic assault on her. If the survey's data can be trusted, we can interpret them in the careful and reasonable way that Gellis and Strauss recommended. Then we may learn that the worst kinds of abuse may be abating. That is still nothing to celebrate. If up to 3% of American women who are married or living with partners are at risk of serious abuse, this would amount to 1.6 million women. If the higher figures that Gellis and Strauss found are right, 3 to 4%, then the number of women at risk is 2.2 million. Both numbers are tragically large and speak to the urgent need for prevention and for shelters and other help for the victims. But how does this help the gender feminist in her Miss Andrews campaign? She needs to find that a large proportion of men are batterers. A meager 3-4% will not serve her purpose. As for journalists, newscasters, their interests are too to often lie in giving a sensational rather than an accurate picture of gender violence. They tend to credit the advocacy sources. Better 4 million or 5 than 1 or 2. Evidently, Time magazine felt 6 was even better. And all the better, too, if the media's readers and viewers get the impression that the inflated figures refer not to slaps, shoves, or pushes, but to brutal, terrifying, life-threatening assaults. Hold on, let me see how far. I'm almost done. Hold on. Y'all like this? Let me take a break. Y'all asked for the book, Who Stole Feminism? Who Stole Feminism? You're being lied to, and this is to build up hatred to prevent the formation of families. Let me keep reading. Gender feminists are committed to the doctrine that the vast majority of batterers or rapists are not fringe characters, but men whom society regards as normal. Sports fan, former fraternity brothers, pillar of the community. For these normal men, women are not so much persons as objects. In the gender feminist view, once a woman is objectified, therefore no longer human. Battering her is simply the next logical step. Just how normal are men who batter? Are they ordinary husbands? These are legitimate questions, but the road to reasonable answers is all too often blocked by feminist dogma. By setting aside feminist roadblocks, we can discern some important truths. Are the batterers really just your average Joe? In the state of Massachusetts, it's typical the large majority of the batterers are criminals. Andrew Klein, chief probation officer in the Quincy Court, Quincy, Massachusetts, studied repeat batterers for the Ford Foundation. In his final report, he said, when Massachusetts computerized its civil restraining order files in 1992, linking them with the state's criminal offender record database, it found almost 80% of the 8,500 male subjects on restraining orders had prior criminal records in the state. Many of the batterers' records for offenses like drunk driving and drugs, but almost half had prior histories of violence against male and female victims, meaning that they're not just violent against women. These criminals are violent. But I'm going to say something. Let me stop here. A lot of women like criminal-ass guys. A lot of women like bad dudes, no good dudes. You can't keep them from hurtful guys. They have an asshole magnet in their coochie, and it sucks them in like a nail to a magnet. And they pick these rotten ass. I've seen them. They have to have a no good dude. They will run, beat up, kick a black good guy away. No pussy for you. You respect me. It's corny. I take your fucking ring, right? And pick a dude. Bitch, I'll throw you off the balcony. No, you won't. You won't throw me off the balcony. You will not. You will not throw me. I want to see you throw. I'm gonna tell you a quick story. I'm gonna go right back to this book. It's a guy, Howard University, talking about a dude who's in, I think, Howard Medical School. This is about 20 some odd years ago, almost 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 2020. This dude had an argument with his girlfriend. He took the telephone wire in the house, wrapped it around her, tied her up, and shook her off the balcony of the apartment, screaming at her. That's very dangerous. He could have dropped her. Do you know what this broad did after he did that? Dangled her off the balcony of She bought him a car. She bought him a car. I can't get my head around that. She bought him a car. There are women who can't relate to a man that's nonviolent. They will work to get that monster out of him. They get off to that. And they'll make the dude act crazy. They will get it out of him. Even if he wouldn't, they will push his buttons. We are only looking at this from the perspective of women. Notice how this thing is all oriented, as if men don't need anything. We're only looking at women. Women. And yet, women have no rights. Nobody cares about women. Nothing else. Women. It's amazing how everything is oriented towards women, but yet women don't have anything. You can tell this is some white shit. It is. Okay, let me keep going. Many of the batterers' records were for offenses such as drug driving. Okay, hold on. Okay, Klein continues. In other words, these men were generally violent, assaulting other males as well as female intimates. The average number of prior crimes against persons complaint was 4.5. Men that are violent against women are violent against men. It's not unique to sex. You're dealing with a violent asshole male who belongs in jail. That doesn't mean all men are violent against women. The gender feminist believes that the average man is a potential batterer because that is how men are socialized in the patriarchy. But ideology aside, there are indications that those who batter are not average. Talk of a generalized misogyny may be preventing us from seeing and facing the particular effect on women and men of the large criminal element in our society. Massachusetts may not be typical. Still, the Massachusetts batterer profile suggests it is not helpful to think of battery exclusively in terms of misogyny, patriarchy, or gender bias. We need to understand why the number of sociopaths in our society, especially violent male sociopaths, is so high. My prediction is that Mr. Klein's important finding will be ignored. And it has been, because this book is dated. My prediction is that Mr. Klein's important finding will be ignored. What use is it to gender warriors like Marilyn French and Gloria Steinem to show that violent criminals tend to abuse their wives and girlfriends and other males as well? Their primary concern is to persuade the public that the so-called normal man is a morally defective human being who gets off on hurting women. There are other important studies that could help shed light on battery and could ultimately help the many victims who are ignored because their batterers do not fit the gender feminist stereotype. As it turns out, lesbians may be battering each other at the same rates as heterosexuals. Several such books and articles document this problem of violence among lesbians. Finally, someone's going to tell the truth. Professor Claire Renzetti, a professor of sociology at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, has studied the problem of lesbian violence and summarized the findings in The Violent Betrayal, Partner Abuse and Lesbian Relationships. It appears that violence in lesbian relationships occurs at about the same frequency as violence in heterosexual relationships. The abuse range from verbal threats and insults to stabbings and shootings. Indeed, batterers display a terrifying ingenuity in their selection of abusive tactics, frequently tailoring the abuse to the specific vulnerability of the partners. Once again, it appears that battery may have little to do with patriarchy or gender bias. Where non-criminals are involved, battery seems to be a pathology of intimacy, as frequent among gays as among straight people. Battery and rape research is the very stuff of gender feminist advocacy. Researchers who try to pursue their investigations in a non-political way are often subject to attack by the advocates. Murray Strauss reports that he and some of his co-workers became the objects of bitter scholarly and personal attacks, including threats and attempts at intimidation. In the late 70s and early 80s, his scholarly presentations were sometimes obstructed by booing, shouting, or picketing. When he was being considered for offices in scientific societies, he was labeled an anti-feminist. A man who's fighting to protect women hates women. I know the experience, being an advocate for women, and find out I hate women because I don't think they should get cancer. Wow. That's why I'm just disrespectful, because it doesn't matter. There's no way to play it. In the November 1993 issue of Marabella, Richard Gellis and Murray Strauss were accused of using sexist reasoning and of the producing of work of pop scholarship. The article offers no evidence for these judgments. And in 1992, a rumor was circulated that Murray Strauss had beaten his wife and sexually harassed his students. Strauss fought back as best he could, and in one instance was able to elicit a written apology from a domestic violence activist. This is how the women get you to go out and start lying. And once a woman says something, well, women wouldn't lie. Listen to the women. She said you raped. She said, we black men have been down this road. Rape! And all of a sudden you're hanging from a tree burning. Didn't touch nobody. This is some crazy Karen bullshit that our women have taken to their breasts like a poisonous snake. Richard Gellis claims that whenever male researchers question exaggerated findings on domestic battery, it is never long before rumors begin circulating that he himself is a batterer. For female skeptics, however, the situation appears to be equally intimidating. When Suzanne K. Steinmetz, co-investigator for the first National Family Violence Survey, was being considered for promotion, the feminists launched a letter-writing campaign urging that it be denied. She also received calls threatening her and her family. There was a bomb threat at a conference where she spoke. As long as the researchers are thus intimidated, we'll probably remain in the dark about the true dimension of a problem that affects the lives of millions of American women. Another factor limiting the prospects for sound research in this area is the absence of a rigorous system of review. In most cases, when a well-known study is flawed, critics can make a name for themselves by showing up its defects. This process keeps researchers honest. However, today's environment for feminist research, the higher your figures for abuse, the more likely you'll reap rewards, regardless of your methodology. You'll be mentioned in the feminist encyclopedias, dictionaries, fact sheets, and textbooks. Your research will be widely publicized. Ellen Goodman, Anna Quinlan, and Judy Mann will put you in their columns. Fashion magazines will reproduce your charts and graphs. You'll be quoted by Pat Schroeder, Joe Biden, and surgeon generals from both parties. Senator Kennedy's office will call. You should expect to be invited to give expert testimony before Congress. As for would-be critics, they're in for grief. The same Time magazine story reported the non-existent March to Dime study that informed readers that between 22% and 35% of all visits by females to an emergency room are for injuries from domestic assaults. This bit of data is one of the most frequently cited statistics in the literature on violence against women. It regularly turns up in news stories on wife abuse. It is in the brochures from domestic violence agencies, and it's on the tip of many politicians' tongues. Where does it come from? The primary source is a 1984 article entitled Domestic Violence Victims in the Emergency Department in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Going to the study, we find that it was conducted at the Henry Ford Hospital in downtown Detroit. The authors candidly inform us that their sample group was not representative of the American population at large. Of the 492 patients who responded to a questionnaire about domestic violence, they report that 90% were from inner city Detroit and 60% were unemployed. We also learned that the 22% figure covers both women and men. 38% of those complaining of abuse were men. The authors of the Detroit study took care to point out this limited scope, but editors in the Journal of the American Medical Association who reported their results were not as careful. In a 1990 column called News Update, we read that 22% to 35% of women presenting any complaints are there because of symptoms relating to ongoing abuse. In their footnotes, they cite the 1984 Detroit study, a paper by Evan Stark and Ann Flitcraft, and a 1989 study published in the Annals of Emergency Medicine. Stark and Flitcraft are perhaps the best-known researchers on domestic battery and emergency room admissions. Their figures for emergency room visits cause domestic battering to go as high as 50%. But they too base their numbers on studies in large urban hospitals. Their figures are higher than those in the Detroit study because their method is to review old medical records and estimate how many women were battered, not relying simply on what the woman or the intending clinician may have said. They have developed what they call an index of suspicion. If a woman was assaulted, but the records did not say who hit her, Stark and Flitcraft classified this as a case of probable domestic abuse. If she has injuries to her face and torso and are inadequately explained, they classify it as suggestive of abuse. They say overall non-abusive injuries tend to be the extremities, whereas the abuse tend to be central, face or torso. This method, coupled with their exclusive reliance on records from large urban hospitals, leads them to very high numbers on abuse. Stark and Flipp's methodology is innovative and imaginative and may indeed help practitioners identify more women who are victimized by abuse. Still, the methodology is highly subjective. Stark and Flitcraft's tendency to lapse into gender feminist jargon raises questions about their objectivity. In an article called Medicine and Patriarchal Violence, they speculate on why women marry. Economic discrimination against women in capitalist societies, job segregation by sex, marginal employment, and lower wages drives women to marry, apply their undervalued labor time to the household drudgery, and remain dependent on men generally, if not on a specific husband, boyfriend, or father. They worry that women's shelters may be co-opted by a bourgeois ideology that diverts women from the need for fundamental social revolution. They cite Karl Marx, Frantz Fanon, Herbert Marcuse, and Michel Foucault as if they are unquestioned authorities on gender politics and on capitalism. They criticize Friedrich Engels, but only because they say he sounds too much like a bourgeois moralist. Flitcraft and Stark appear to regard the abuse that they claim to have found as the sort of thing one would expect to find in a bourgeois capitalist patriarchy. But it is often the work the other way too if you choose research methodology that will give you the findings you expect. The Journal of American Medical Association cites a third source for the 22 to 35% statistic, an article called Education is Not Enough: System Failure in Protecting Battered Women from the Annals of Emergency Medicine. That article reports on a small study done of the emergency department records on medical schools serving inner city population in Philadelphia, like Flitcraft and Stark, by using guesstimates and focusing on a segment of the population with the highest overall rates of violence. The researchers were able to get very high figures, up to 30%. In examining research on battery, one sees the respected medical periodicals uncritically indulge the feminists and their inflationary tendencies. It is hard to avoid the impression that the medical journals have dropped their usual standards when reporting the findings of the battery studies. In other words, they don't expect as much when you're doing something on women, whatever they say. When you're a man, you can't just do this. This is what I hate about being in the university. They could say or do anything and get a pass. You're a male. Even if you proved it, well, you need to get more than 4 sources, right? Woman, oh, well, go ahead, sweetie. That's right. Put that down. Okay. And they're oppressed. All right. It is pretty clear that studies of this poor caliber on some other subjects in medical interest and importance would either not be reported or be reported with many caveats. To my mind, giving research on women's topics abnormal latitude is patronizingly sexist. In other words, giving women a pass on bullshit shows that you don't respect women. In November of 1992, the Family Violence Prevention Fund did a survey of all 397 emergency departments in California hospitals. Nurse managers were asked during a typical month approximately how many patients have been diagnosed with an injury caused by domestic violence. The nurses' estimates range from 2 per month for small hospitals to 8 per month for large hospitals. This finding corresponds to Gell's and Strauss' low figure for violence that could require hospitalization. Those who did the fund survey did not accept its results. They concluded instead that the nurses are simply not equipped to deal with the problem and are vastly understating it. The low identity rates reported in the survey might be explained by the marked lack of domestic violence specific training. One may agree that the nurses and doctors do need that kind of training. On the other hand, the low rates of battery that they found sound plausible, for unlike all the other studies in the emergency room and violence, this one actually polled a fair cross-section of hospitals. Because many feminist activists and researchers have so great a stake in exaggerating the problem and so little compunction in doing so, objective information on battery is hard to come by. The Super Bowl story was a bald untruth from the start. The rule of thumb story is an example of revisionist history that feminists happily fell into believing. It reinforces their perspective on society, and they tell it as a way of winning converts to their angry creed. As told in the essay of one of the most popular textbooks in women's studies, Women, a Feminist Perspective, the popular expression rule of thumb originates from English common law, which allowed a husband to beat a woman with a whip or stick no bigger in diameter than his thumb. I actually learned this in Harvard. I've had some women jump on me over men being able to beat women with sticks. I'd never heard of anything like this. And I was told I was lying and that the men in my family had beaten women with sticks. They hadn't told me. I'm pretty certain my mother would have killed my father if he beat her with the stick. I just, you know, I don't give. That's why I don't respect them. Literally, this woman was just screaming at me about being beaten with sticks. I'm thinking, do you know anyone? Well, the women haven't told anyone. They've been covering up for you men. They've been getting beat by sticks for years. All all of us have been getting beat. You men have been beating us with sticks. Why do y'all accept this? How could you do this? And I'm thinking, beat a woman with a stick? I'm not gonna beat no woman with no stick. I wouldn't be with their ass. Even if I could beat someone with a stick, I wouldn't want someone. Even if I could, I wouldn't want to do it. Okay, let me keep reading this. The husband's prerogative was incorporated into American law. This is what they say. Several states had statutes that essentially allowed a man to beat his wife without interference from the courts. This is what they teach as fact in elite schools. And you have all these women mad looking at you, rapist, beater, based on some imaginary shit written up by a bunch of miserable, ugly, chunky, overweight dykes. And of course, it comes back to our community. You know, black men, yep, they beating us with sticks. I know. Wow. All right, let me keep reading. This story is supposed to bring home to students the realization that they've been born into a system that tolerates violence against women. Sheila Kell, a feminist legal activist who's played a central role in launching the Abuse Bowl hoax, appeared on CNN's Sonia Live 4 months after the incident, holding forth the supposed history of the rule, acclaiming the new feminists for finally striking back. I think we're undoing thousands and thousands of years of human history. You know the phrase rule of thumb that everybody thinks is the standard measure for everything. It was a law in England that said you could beat your wife with the stick as long as it was no thicker than your thumb. Columnists and journalists writing about domestic violence were quick to pick up the antidote. Let's read. Rule of thumb was supposedly derived from the ancient right of the husband to discipline his wife with a rod no thicker than his thumb. Time magazine, September 5th, 1983. A husband's right to beat his wife, included in Blackstone's 1687 codification of common law. The husband has the right to physically chastise an errant wife so long as the stick is no bigger than their thumb, the so-called rule of thumb. Washington Post, January 3rd, 1989. Violence against women does not have to be the rule of thumb, an idiom from the Old English law that said that a man could beat his wife if the stick is no thicker than his thumb. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, April 22nd, 1993. The rule of thumb, however, turns out to be an excellent example of what may be called feminist fiction. It cannot be found in William Blackstone's treatise on English common law. On the contrary, British law since the 1770s and our American law, predating the American Revolution, prohibits wife beating, though there may have been periods and places in which the prohibition was only indifferently enforced. That the phrase did not even originate in the legal practice and could not have been ascertained by the fact checker who took the trouble to look up the Oxford English Dictionary, which notes the term has been used metaphorically for at least 300 years to refer to any method of measurement or technique estimation derived from experience rather than science. According to Canadian folklorist Philip Hiscock, the real explanation of rule of thumb is that it derives from the woodworkers who knew their trade so well they rarely or never fell back on the use of such things as rulers. Instead, they would measure things by example the length of their thumbs. Hiscock adds that the phrase came into metaphorical use in the late 17th century. Hitchcock could not track the source of the idea of the term derived from the principle of governing wife beating, but he believes it is an example of modern folklore and compares it to other back-formed explanations, such as the claim that esophagus comes from sparrowgrass, or the ring around the rosy is about the plague. We shall see that Hiscock's hunch was correct, but we must first begin by exonerating William Blackstone. Excuse me. The Englishman who codified centuries of legal customs and practices into an elegant and clearly organized tome known as the Commentaries on the Law of England. The Commentaries, a classic of legal literature, became the basis for the development of American law. The so-called rule of thumb as a guideline for wife beating does not occur in Blackstone's compendium, although he does refer to an ancient law that permitted physical chastisement and contrasted with the more enlightened standards of his own day. Listen to this. The husband also, by the old law, may give his wife a moderate correction, for as he is to answer for her misbehavior, the law thought it reasonable to entrust him with the power of restraining her by domestic chastisement, in the same moderation that a man is allowed to correct his apprentices or children. But the power of correction was confined within reasonable bounds, and the husband was prohibited from using any violence to his wife, alita quam adverium ex causa regimentis et castigatus iuris suare. Okay, wait a second. And other than lawfully reasonable belongs to the husband due to the governing or correction of his wife. But with us, in the politer reign of Charles II, this power of correction began to be doubted, and a wife may now have the security of peace against her husband. Yet among the lower rank of people, the courts will still permit a husband to restrain wife of her liberty in case of any gross misbehavior. In America, there have been laws against wife beating since the Revolution. By 1870, it was illegal in every state. But even before then, wife beaters were arrested and punished for assault and battery. Historian and feminist Elizabeth Pleck observes in the scholarly article entitled Wife Battering in 19th Century America, it has often been claimed that wife beating in 19th century America was illegal. Actually, though, several states passed statutes legally prohibiting wife beating, at least one statute even predates the American Revolution. Massachusetts Bay Colony prohibited wife beating as early as 1655. The edict states no man shall strike his wife nor any woman her husband on the penalty of such a fine not exceeding 10 pounds for one offense, or such corporal punishment as the county shall determine. She points out that punishments for wife beaters could be severe. And in 1882 Maryland statute, a culprit could receive 40 lashes at the whipping post. In Delaware, the number was 30. In New Mexico, fines ranged from $255 to $1,000 were levied, or sentences of 1 to 5 years in prison imposed. For most of our history, in fact, wife beating has been considered a sin comparable to thievery and adultery. Religious groups, particularly Protestant groups as Quakers, Methodists, and Baptists, punished, shunned, and excommunicated wife beaters. Husbands, brothers, and neighbors often took vengeance against the batterer. Vigilante parties sometimes abducted wife beaters and whipped them. Unlike the feminists want you, men would protect women, don't mistreat women. Most men hate men that are violent against women and feel within our right to do something to hurt men that prey on women and children. But that's the patriarchy looking out for women, and the lesbo-dyke, matriarchal, lying feminists would rather women be the victims of violence under matriarchy, where men are not around women, so they could blame women to increase the hatred and the confusion of the society that they wish to destroy. Real talk. Just how did this false account originate? How did it achieve authority and currency? As with many myths, there are a small core of fact surrounding by an accretion of error. In the course of rendering rulings on cases before them, two Southern judges had alluded to an ancient law according to which a man could beat his wife as long as the implement was no wider than his thumb. The judges, one from North Carolina, the other from Mississippi, did not accept the authority of the ancient law. The North Carolina judge referred to it as barbarism, and both judges found the husband in the case in question guilty of wife abuse. Nonetheless, their rulings seemed to tolerate the notion that men had a measure of latitude and physically chastising their wives. Fortunately, as Pleck takes pains to remind us, they were not representative on judicial opinion on the rest of the country. In 1976, Del Martin, a coordinator for the National Organization of Women Task Force on Battered Women, came across a reference to the two judges and their remarks. Neither judge had used the phrase rule of thumb, but a thumb had been mentioned, and Miss Martin took note of it. Our law, based on the Old English common law doctrines, explicitly permitted wife beating for correctional purposes. However, certain restrictions did exist. For example, the common law doctrine had been modified to allow the husband the right to whip his wife provided he used the switch no bigger than his thumb, the rule of thumb, so to speak. Miss Martin had not claimed that the term rule of thumb originated from common law. Before long, however, the ancient law alluded to by two obscure Southern judges was being treated as an unchallenged principle in both British and American law, and journalists and academics alike were banding the notion about. Feminist Terry Davidson, in an article entitled Wife Beating, a Recurring Phenomenon Throughout History, claims that one of the reasons the 19th century British wives were dealt with so harshly by their husbands and the legal system was the rule of thumb. It castigates Blackstone himself. Blackstone saw nothing unreasonable about the wife beating law. In fact, he believed it to be quite moderate. These interpretive errors were given added authority by a group of scholars and lawyers who in 1982 prepared a report on wife abuse for the United States Commission on Civil Rights under the rule of thumb, battered women, and the administration of justice, a report by the United States Commission on Civil Rights. On one page they note the American law was built upon the British common law that condoned wife beating, even prescribed the weapon to be used. This rule of thumb stipulated that a man could only beat his wife with a rod not thicker than his thumb. It went on to speak of Blackstone as a jurist who greatly influenced the making of the law in American colonies and who commented on the rule of thumb, justifying the rule by noting that the law threw out reasonable to entrust the husband with the power of chastisement and in the same moderation that a man is allowed to correct his apprentices or children. The publication of this report established the feminist fable about the origin of the term in popular lore and misogyny of Blackstone and our law as fact. Misstatements about the rule of thumb still appear in the popular press. The same 1993 Time magazine article that popularized the non-existent March of Dimes study on domestic violence and birth defects reported between 22 and 35% of all visits by females to emergency rooms are for injuries from domestic assaults. Also cited New York University law professor Holly McGuigan. We talk about the notion of the rule of thumb, forgetting it had to do with the restriction on a man's right to use a weapon against his wife. He couldn't use a rod that was larger than his thumb. Professor Magnus' law students would do well to check their Blackstone. I'm coming here. We react to the batterers with revulsion, first because what they do, which is ugly and cruel, and second because of what they are, which is cowardly and often sadistic. As those working in social services and shelters well know, helping battered women is difficult as it is exigent. Resources are limited, strategies for help are often controversial. On a wider canvas, we need good legislation and good public policy as well as good funds earmarked towards the problem. But sound public policy on battery cannot be made without credible and trustworthy information and promulgating sensational untruths. Gender feminists systematically diminish public trust. Experts concerned about battery and devoted to alleviating it are worried. As Michael Lindsay said to Ken Ringel, when people make crazy statements like this, the credibility of the whole cause can go right out the window. I want to take time to just chat with y'all. So, there's one more chapter that I want to do from this, and then I'm going to put this book aside. But what do y'all think of this broad? She's telling the truth. Oh, this is a short chapter. This is Who Stole Feminism. You've been lied to. Men are not beating up and just dogging women everywhere. This who came up with this crap? I want to do another one. Let's do chapter 10. Chapter 10 ain't that long. I think I can kill chapter 10 and we can stop. I'll take a break and come back with 26. Oh, wow. Let me see. 15 pages. I think I can do this. Chapter 10. Who Stole Feminism? Christine Hoff Summers. Rape research. I apologize to the readers for the clinical tone of this chapter. As a crime against persons, rape is uniquely horrible in its long-term effects. The anguish it brings is often followed by an abiding sense of fear and shame. Discussions on the data of rape inevitably seems callous. How can one quantify a sense of deep violation behind the statistics? Terms like incidence and prevalence are statistical jargon. Once we use them, necessarily abstract ourselves from the misery. Yet it remains clear to arrive at the intelligent policies and strategies to decrease the occurrences of rape. We have no alternative but to gather and analyze data, and to do so does not make us callous. The truth is not an enemy to compassion, and falsehood is no friend. Some feminists routinely refer to American society as a rape culture. Yet estimates on the prevalence of rape vary wildly. According to the FBI Uniform Crime Report, there were 102,560 reported or attempted rapes in 1990. The Bureau of Justice Statistics estimate that 130,000 women were victims of rape in 1990. The Harris poll sets the figure at 380,000 rapes or sexual assaults for 1993. According to the study of the National Victims Center, there were 683,000 completed forcible rapes in 1990. The Justice Department says that 8% of all American women will be rape victims or attempted rape victims in their lifetime. The radical feminist legal scholar Catherine McKinnon, however, claims that by conservative definitions of rape, happens to almost half of all women at least once in their lives. Who's right? Feminists, activists, and others have plausibly argued the relatively low figures of the FBI and the Bureau of Justice Statistics are not trustworthy. The FBI survey is based on the number of cases reported to the police, but rape is among the most underreported of crimes. The Bureau of Justice and the National Crime Survey is based on interviews with 100,000 randomly selected women. It, too, is said to be flawed because a woman would never directly question about rape. Rape was discussed only if the woman happened to bring it up in the course of answering the more general questions about criminal victimization. The Justice Department has changed its method of questioning to meet this criticism, so we will know in a year or two whether it has had a significant effect on its numbers. Clearly, independent studies on the incidence and prevalence of rape are badly needed. Unfortunately, research groups investigating in this area have no common definition of rape, and the results so far have led to confusion and acrimony. Of the rape studies by non-governmental groups, the two most frequently cited are Miss Magazine, reported by Mary Koss, and the 1992 Women's Study by Dr. Dean Kirkpatrick of the Crime Victims Research and Treatment Center at the Medical School of South Carolina. In 1982, Mary Koss, a professor of psychology at Kent State University in Ohio, published an article on rape in which she expressed the orthodox gender feminist view that rape represents an extreme behavior, but one that is on a continuum with the normal male behavior within the culture. Some well-placed feminist activists were impressed by her. As Koss tells it, she received a phone call out of the blue inviting her to lunch with Gloria Steinem. For Koss, the lunch was a turning point. Miss Magazine had decided to do a national rape survey on college campuses, and Koss was chosen to direct it. Koss's findings would become the most frequently cited research on women's victimization, not so much established scholars in the field of rape, research as by journalists, politicians, and activists. Koss and her associates interviewed slightly more than 3,000 college women, randomly selected nationwide. The young women were asked 10 questions about sexual violation. These were followed by several questions about the precise nature of the violation. Had they been drinking? What were their emotions during and after the event? What forms of resistance did they use? How would they label the event? Koss counted everyone who answered affirmatively to any of the last 3 questions as having been raped. Have you had sexual intercourse when you didn't want to because the man gave you alcohol or drugs? That's rape. Have you had sexual intercourse when you did not want to because the man threatened to use some degree of physical force to make you? Have you had sexual acts when you didn't want to because a man threatened to use some degree of physical force to make you? Koss and her colleagues concluded that 15.4% of the respondents had been raped and 12.1% had been attempted victims of rape. Thus, a total of 27.5% of the respondents were determined to have been victims of rape or attempted rape because they gave answers that fit Koss's criterion for rape. Penetration by penis, finger, or other objects under coercive influence such as physical force, alcohol, or threats. However, that is not how the so-called rape victims saw it. Only about a quarter of the women Koss called rape victims labeled what happened to them as rape. According to Koss, the answers to the follow-up questions revealed that only 27% of the women she counted as having been labeled rape labeled themselves as rape victims. Of the remainder, 49% said it was miscommunication, 14% said it was a crime but not rape, and 11% said they didn't feel victimized. In line with her view of rape and her existing continuum of male sexual aggression, Koss also asked, have you given it to sex play when you didn't want it because you were overwhelmed by man's continual arguments and pressure? To this question, 53.7% responded affirmatively, and they were counted as having been sexually victimized. In Koss's study released in 1988, it became known as the MISS Report. Here is how the MISS Foundation characterized the results. The MISS Project, the largest scientific investigation ever undertaken on the subject, revealed some disquieting statistics, including this astonishing fact. 1 in 4 female respondents had an experience that met the legal definition of rape or attempted rape. 1 in 4 has since become the official figure on women's rape victimization, cited in Women's Studies Department, rape crisis centers, women's magazines, and protest buttons and posters. Susan Faludi defended it on Newsweek's story on sexual correctness. Naomi Wolf refers to it in The Beauty Myth, calculating that acquaintance rape is more common than left-handedness, alcoholism, and heart attacks. 1 in 4 is chanted in Take Back the Night processions, and it is the number given in the date rape brochures handed out at freshman orientation at colleges and universities around the country. Politicians from Senator Joe Biden of Delaware, Democrat, to Republican Congressman Jim Ramstad of Minnesota cite it regularly. And it is the primary reason for Title IV, Safe Campuses for Women, a, a Provision for Violence Against Women Act of 1993, which provides $20 million to combat rape on college campuses. When Neil Gilbert, professor at Berkeley School of Social Welfare, first read 1 in 4 figure in the school newspaper, he was convinced it could not be accurate. The results did not tally with the finding of almost all previous research on rape. When he read the study, he was able to see where the high figures came from and why Acosta's approach was unsound. He noticed, for example, that Costa and her colleagues count victims of rape as any respondent who answered yes to the question, have you had sexual intercourse when you did not want to because the man gave you alcohol or drugs? That opened up the door to regarding a rape victim as anyone who regretted her liaison of the previous night. If your date mixes a pitcher of margaritas and encourages you to drink with him and you accept the drink, have you been administered an intoxicant? What's up with you, selfish? I have to take a cat break. Give me 1 second. My dog is just selfish. It's going to just ruin everything. Hold on 1 second. Selfish is thirsty. I got to get them a drink. Give me 2 minutes. I'll be right back. What do you want, dog? Ah. Whew. Okay. I'm back. Okay, let's get back to this. He was talking about, wait a minute. If your date mixes a pitcher of margaritas and encourages you to drink with him and you accept a drink, have you been administered an intoxicant and has your judgment been impaired? Certainly, if you pass out and you're molested, one would call it rape. But if you drink and while intoxicated engage in sex that you later came to regret, have you been raped? Cost does not address these questions specifically. She merely counts your date as a rapist and your rape as a statistic if you drank with your date and regret having sex with him. As Gilbert points out, the question is cost posed is far too ambiguous. What does having sex because a man gives you drugs or alcohol signify? A positive response does not indicate whether duress, intoxication, force, or the threat of force were present, whether the woman's judgment or control was substantially impaired, or whether the man purposely got the woman drunk in order to prevent her resistance to sexual advances. While the item could have been clearly worded to denote intentional incapacitation of the victim, as the question stands, it would require the mind of the reader to detect whether any affirmative response corresponds with this legal definition of rape. Cost, however, insisted her criteria conform with the legal definition of rape used in some states, as she cited in particular the statute of rape in her own state of Ohio. No person shall engage in sexual conduct with another person when, for the purposes of preventing resistance, the offender substantially impairs the other's judgment or control by administering any drug or intoxicant to another person. Two reporters from The Blade, a small progressive Toledo, Ohio newspaper that has won awards for its excellence in its investigative articles, were not too convinced that the 1 in 4 figure was accurate. They took a close look at Costa's study and several others that were being cited to support this alarming tidings of widespread sexual abuse on college campuses. In a special 3-part series on rape called The Making of an Epidemic, published in October 1992, the reporters, Nara Schoenberg and Sam Rowe, revealed that Koss was quoting the Ohio statute in this very misleading way. She had stopped short of mentioning the qualifying clause of the statute, which specifically excludes a situation where a person implies an intended partner would drink or drugs in hopes of lowered inhibition might lead to a liaison. Koss now concedes that the question 8 was badly worded. Indeed, she told the Blade reporters, at the time I viewed the question as legal. I now concede it's ambiguous. As Koss herself told the Blade, once you remove positive responses to the alcohol question, the finding that 1 in 7 college women is a victim of rape drops to 1 in 9. But we shall see that this number 2 is unacceptably high. For Gilbert, the most serious indication that something was basically awry in the Miss Koss study was the majority of the women she classified as having been raped did not believe that they had been raped. Of those Koss counts as having been raped, only 27% thought they had been. 73% did not say that what had happened to them was rape. In effect, Koss and her followers present us with a picture of confused young women overwhelmed by threatening males who force their attentions on them during the course of a date, but unable or unwilling to classify their experience as rape. Does that picture fit the average female undergraduate? For that matter, does it plausibly apply to the large community? As journalist Kathy Young observes, women have sex after the initial reluctance for a number of reasons. Fear of being beaten up by their dates is rarely reported as one of them. Katie Rife, a graduate student in English at Princeton and the author of The Morning After Sex, Fear, and Feminism on Campus, argues along similar lines. She claims that Koss had no right to reject the judgment of college women that didn't think they were raped. But Katha Pollitt of the Nation defends Koss, pointing out that in many cases people are wrong without knowing it. Thus, we do not say that the victims of other injustices, fraud, malpractice, job discrimination, have suffered no wrong as long as they are unaware of the law. Pollitt's analogy is faulty. However, if Jane has ugly financial dealings and Tom and an expert explained to Jane and Tom has defrauded her, then Jane usually thanks the expert for having enlightened her about the legal facts. To make her case, Pollitt would have to show that rape victims who are unaware that they have been raped would accept Koss's judgment that they really were. But this has not been shown. Koss did not enlighten the women she counts as rape victims. And they did not say, now that you explain it, we can see that we were. Koss and Pollitt make a technical and, in fact, dubious legal point. Women are ignorant about what counts as rape. Rife makes a straightforward human point. The women were there. They know best how to judge what happened to them. Since when do feminists consider law to override women's experiences? Koss also found that 42% of those she counted as rape victims went on to have sex with their attackers on a later occasion. For victims of attempted rape, the figure for subsequent sex with a reported assailant was 35%. Koss is quick to point out that it is not known if the subsequent sex was forced or voluntary, and that most of the relationships did eventually break up subsequently due to the victimization. But of course, most college relationships break up eventually for one reason or the other. Yet instead of taking these young women at their word, Koss cast about explanations of why so many raped women would return to their assailants, implying that they have been coerced. Such ends by treating her subjects' rejections of her findings as evidence that they were confused and sexually naive. There is a more respectful explanation. Since most of those that Koss counts as rape victims did not regard themselves as having been raped, why not take this fact and the fact that so many went back to their partners as reasonable indications that they had not been raped to begin with? Toledo reporters calculated that if you eliminate the affirmative responses to alcohol and drug question, and you also subtract from Koss's results the women who did not think they were raped, her 1 in 4 figure for rape and attempted rape drops to 1 in 22 and 1 in 33. Other frequent noted non-governmental rape study, the National Women's Study that was conducted by Dean Kirkpatrick, from an interview sample of 4,008 women, the study projected there were 683,000 rapes in 1990. As to the prevalence, it concluded that in America, 1 out of every 8 adult women, or at least 12.1 million American women, has been the victim of forcible rape sometime in her life. Unlike Koss's report, which tallied rape attempts as well as rapes, the Kilpatrick study focused exclusively on rape. Interviews were conducted by phone by female interviewers. A woman who agreed to become part of the study heard the following from an interviewer. Women do not always report such experiences to police or discuss them with family or friends. The person making the advances is not always a stranger, but can be a friend, a boyfriend, even a family member. Such experiences can occur any time in a woman's life, even as a child. Pointing out that she wants to hear about any such experiences, regardless of how long ago it happened or who made the advances, the interviewer proceeds to ask 4 questions. Has a man or boy ever made you have sex by using force or threatening to harm you or someone close to you? Just so there's no mistake, by sex we mean putting a penis in your vagina. 2, Has anyone made you have oral sex by force or threat of harm? Just to make sure there's no mistake, oral sex is when we mean a man or boy puts his penis in your mouth or somebody penetrates your vagina and anus with his mouth or tongue. 3. Has anyone ever made you have anal sex by force or threat of harm? 4. Has anyone ever put their finger or objects in your vagina or anus against your will by using force or threat? Any woman that answered yes to any of the 4 questions was classified as a victim of rape. This seems to be a fairly straightforward and well-designed survey that provides a window into the private horror that many women, especially very young women, experience. One of the more disturbing findings of the survey was that 61% of the victims said they were 17 or younger when the rape occurred. There is, however, one flaw that affects the significance of Kirkpatrick's findings. The affirmative answer to any of the first 3 questions does reasonable to put one in the category of a rape victim. The fourth is problematic, for it includes a case by which a boy penetrated the girl with his finger against her will in a heavy petting situation. Certainly the boy behaved badly, but is he a rapist? Probably neither he nor his date would say so, yet the survey classifies him as a rapist and her as a rape victim. I called Dr. Kirkpatrick to ask him about the 4th question. Well, he said, if a woman's forcibly penetrated by an object such as a broomstick, we would call it rape. So would I said, but isn't there a big difference between being violated by a broomstick and being violated by a finger? Dr. Kirkpatrick acknowledged this. We should have split out fingers versus objects, he, he said. Still, he assured me that the question did not significantly influence the outcome. But I wondered. The study had found an epidemic of rape among teenagers, just the age group most likely to get into situations that I've described. The more serious worry is Kirkpatrick's findings, and many other findings on rape vary widely unless the respondents are explicitly asked whether they've been raped. And the 1993 Lewis Harris advocates did a telephone survey and came up with quite different results. Harris was commissioned by the Commonwealth Fund to study women's health. As we shall see, their high figures on women's depression and psychological abuse by men caused a stir. But their finding on rape went altogether unnoticed. Among the questions asked in its random sample of 2,500 women was, in the last 5 years, have you been a victim of rape or sexual assault? 2% of the respondents said yes, 98% said no. Since the attempted rape counts as sexual assault, the combined figure for rape and attempted rape would be 1.9 million over 5 years or 380,000 for a single year. Since there are approximately twice as many attempted rapes as completed rapes, the Commonwealth Harris figure for completed rapes would come to approximately 190,000. This is dramatically lower than Kirkpatrick's finding of 683,000 completed forcible rapes. The Harris interviewer also asked a question about acquaintance and marital rape that is worded very much like Kirkpatrick's in cost. The past year, did your partner ever try to force you to have sexual relations by using physical force such as holding you down, hitting you, threatening to hit you or not? Not a single respondent of the Harris poll sample answered yes. How to explain the discrepancy? True women are often extremely reluctant to talk about sexual violence that they have experienced, but the Harris pollster had a lot of other awkward personal questions, to which asked the women to respond with candor. 6% said they considered suicide, 5% admitted to using hard drugs, 10% said that they had been sexually abused when they were growing up. I didn't have the answer, though it seems obvious to me that such wide variances should make us appreciate the difficulty of getting reliable figures on the risk of rape from the research, that the real risk should be known It's obvious. The Blade reporters interviewed students on their fears and found them anxious and bewildered. It makes a big difference as one is in 3 or 1 in 50, said April Groff of the University of Michigan, who says she is very scared. I have to say, honestly, I'd think about rape a lot less if I knew the number was 1 in 50. When the Blade reporters asked Kirkpatrick why he had not asked women whether they had been raped, he told them that there had been no time in the 35-minute interview. That's probably something that ended up on the cutting room floor, but Kirkpatrick's exclusion of such a question resulted in much higher figures. When pressed about why he omitted from the study, for which he had received $1 million federal grant, if people think that is a key question, let them get their own grant and do their own study. Kirkpatrick had done an earlier study in which respondents were explicitly asked whether they had been raped. That study showed a relatively low prevalence of 5%, 1 in 20, and got very little publicity. Kirkpatrick subsequently abandoned his former methodology in favor of Mrs. Coss's methodology, which allows the surveyor to decide whether the rape occurred. Like Koss, he used an expanded definition of rape. Both include penetration by finger. Koss's new approach yielded him high numbers, 1 in 8, and citations in major newspapers around the country. His graphs were reproduced in Time magazine under the heading, Unsettling Report on an Epidemic of Rape. Now he shares with Koss the honor of being the principal expert cited by the media, politicians, and activists. There are many researchers who study rape victimization, but their relatively low figures generate no headlines. Reporters from the Blade interviewed several scholars whose findings on rapes were not sensational, but whose research methods were sound and were not based on controversial definitions. Eugene Kennan, a retired professor of sociology from Purdue University and a pioneer in the field of acquaintance rape, is upset by the intrusion of politics into the field of inquiry. This is a highly convoluted activism rather than social science research. Professor Margaret Gordon of the University of Washington did a study in 1981 that came up with the relatively low figures for rape, 1 in 50. She tells of the negative reaction to her finding. There was some pressure, at least. I felt pressure to have rape be as prevalent as possible. I'm a pretty strong feminist, but one of the things I was fighting was the avid feminists were trying to get me to say things were worse than what they really are. Dr. Linda George of Duke University found relatively low rates of rape, 1 in 17, even though she asked questions very close to Kilpatrick's. She told the Blade she is concerned with many of her colleagues treat the high numbers as if they are cast in stone. Dr. Naomi Breslau, Director of Research and Psychiatry, the department at the Henry Ford Health Science Center in Detroit, also found low numbers and feels it is important to challenge the popular view that the higher the numbers are necessarily more accurate. Dr. Breslau sees a need for a new and more objective program of research. It is really an open question. We really don't know a whole lot about it. I'm gonna stop here because we're over 2 hours. I just need to talk to y'all for a second. What do y'all think? Now I've done all this freaking reading. That these feminists tell us that all these women are just getting raped and women getting beat and women getting dogged. I mean, and it's not quite true. And all of this, and by the way, this is applied to black men, that we're the rapists and we're the beaters. See how we get dogged by lies made by white women? Here we are losing once again. We fight for affirmative action and white women get it. Now I'm going to stop again. I'm going to stop again. We're going to come back in. If y'all have questions, pop me an email. Um, and forgive me, I'm going slower than what I normally do, but I'm getting through. I'm getting through my work. This is a good book. It's you can get these cheaply. If ever you want to have a fight with the feminists, even though this book is old, it's a good example of how they lie, cheat, and steal. What y'all think? Y'all gonna get a copy? And I've got some more stacked up here. Man, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna come back because I got a couple. I've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh yeah, I've got about 5 or 6 things I want to run through, and I'm gonna stop again. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna keep doing these. I've got a total of about 5 or 6 books I want to run through, and I don't know. The weather is crazy here. It's making me sleepy because it goes back and forth and back and forth. But look, it's 12 now. I'm going to take like a 2 to 3 hour break, and I'm going to come back and do some more. Have y'all learned anything? I hope y'all learning something. And send me a piece. I especially know when people send me like a buck, so I know folk are getting something. But so we've been lied to about rape. We've been lied to about domestic violence. That feeds into more brutality against black men. We're the big losers behind these feminist lies. So let me see, it's 12:29. I think we started at 10:15. We can stop. We can stop for a second. I'm gonna come back maybe 2:30 or 3:30. I'll put up a thing and let y'all know, and we're gonna continue. In fact, I'm gonna bring in some other sensational stuff to keep it out there. I just hope y'all like this because we have got to deal with this. And by the way, our young brothers are harassed and hounded over all this fear of us being rapists. So if you have questions, pop me an email, wrandyshow@gmail. Of course, if you want to send me a piece, the best thing to do is DRRANDY, Randy Short at Cash App, or wrandyshow@gmail.com. I have a Zelle, or I have PayPal. Keep them coming. Keep it coming. It's being used wisely. I have anyway. Let me stop here. It's 12:30. I think I need about 2 hours, maybe 2, 3 hours. I'll be back, and I'm gonna go back at it. I'm gonna try to like go up into prime time. Um, this is one of my favorite books here. I don't know if I'll get into this right now. I'm doing white people stuff, but y'all got the Crisis in Sexual Politics by Nathan and Julia Hare. But in the interim, we're gonna keep doing this. Okay, it's time to stop. I'm gonna take off for a second. So let me come out of Facebook first. So I shut down Facebook. Film for you. How is everybody? That's one. And I'm coming out of YouTube. And now I'm